first of all, I just want to say it's a real pleasure to be here. I'm based in Hong Kong, and I don't really get a lot of chance to meet developers face to face or actually test games before their launch. So this is kind of a big treat for me. So I've got a lot of content today. Hopefully you guys will find it helpful. So the topic of my talk, you can see, is top 5 mistakes developers make when publishing a game globally. I don't like to dwell on that word mistakes, so let's just reword it to top 5 keys that you guys should keep in mind when publishing a game globally. All right, so here's the rundown for today. We'll start with just a really quick intro to 6 Waves, and also I want to find out more about you guys. I'll talk a little bit about the challenges facing not only developers but also publishers in the industry. I'll kind of highlight 5 key points, so not exactly mistakes, but things that you should really think closely and carefully about before you're getting ready to launch your game. Talk about why these are important, show some real-world examples from the market, and also what can we learn or take away from these 5 points. All right, so really quickly about 6 Waves. We launched, we're actually based in Hong Kong. We launched Facebook games back in 2008. So as a Facebook publisher, we're by far the most experienced publisher in the space. We've got a really large network. We've published over 200 games in the last 6 years, 5 global offices, I can see. In addition to Facebook, we also publish on Japan, on Yahoo Mobile Game, and also mobile games now, iOS, Android, and now Amazon as well. Here's a quick sample of some of the companies that we've worked with and partnered together with on the Facebook and mobile side of things. So as you can see, very, very large international game companies, entertainment companies, etc. But at the same time, we also work with a lot of really small independent teams, small studios, startups. So we're quite flexible and also very global. So for us, from over 6 years of publishing experience, we have a lot of firsthand knowledge about games that have succeeded, games that have not succeeded, and that's really what I'm here to do today, is to share some of the learnings from these publishing experiences. So before we get any further, just a quick survey of the room. How many of you guys have developed a game for Facebook before, or are developing a Facebook game? Okay, see, oh, that's pretty good. How about mobile games? Are you guys developing mobile games? Okay, so probably most people. That's pretty much what I expected. Anybody here, this is random but also somewhat related, anybody here a basketball fan? Some people. Okay, great. So you guys will get a little bit more out of today's talk than the others, but hopefully the guys that are not basketball fans will get it too. So anyway, these are the challenges that I see that are really facing us as game developers. Number one, there's more competition than ever before. You guys know it's over 1 million apps in the App Store, 1 million apps in Google Play as well. Not only are there more games, and the games are getting better, they're more competitive, but it's also much more expensive to market and to actually grow these games. At the same time, these games that we're spending a lot of energy on are actually not lasting for very, very long. So players have shorter attention spans. If they don't really latch onto a game right away, they're going to move on and try something else. And to compound things and make it even worse, there's actually not a lot of new channels for finding new content. It's still, at least for mobile games, a lot of word of mouth, a lot of just checking the charts and seeing what's being featured. So not a lot of choices, and really, as developers, we have our work cut out for us. So it's really challenging. And if you're a basketball player, and let's say you played in high school or something, getting your app to kind of be a hit app is kind of like making it to the NBA. I think the odds are slightly better than 1 in a million. So that's kind of the rough way to think about it. But what I'm here to talk about are the key things that can basically improve your chances of success. All right, so the first key is actually having clearly defined goals. And that seems very obvious, but in talking to developers, a lot of them really don't have a focus. And I think that's where you really need to start. So ask yourself, what am I trying to achieve? What's your vision for the game, right? So that could be in terms of the gameplay, the theme, the genre of your game. But more importantly, what are you trying to bring to the market? Is it going to be something similar to what's already out there? Am I coming out with some new innovation, some new gameplay that is not popular before? And what are my strengths as a developer, and how can I leverage those to make a really good game experience? So maybe I'm really good at word games or hidden object games. Absolutely leverage those experiences and those strengths to your advantage and make the best possible game. As you kind of continue to think about this, and you know, it's very important to keep in mind who your audience is going to be. Sometimes we get people submitting games for our review that are just very, very niche audience, very, very niche theme. There's nothing wrong with that as long as you recognize that that's going to dictate how you market and launch your game. So whatever vision you have, whatever kind of audience you're thinking about, that's going to kind of go into the planning of the launch of your game. All right? The other thing you really need to think about is also how to define success. So for developers and publishers, that could be several different things. It could be actual numbers, so in terms of revenue, ARPU, LTV. It could be just being at the top of the charts. That really matters to some people, but depending on which chart, that may or may not matter. So for us, top grossing is much more important than top free. It could be to be the top of a specific category in the App Store. That's okay too, as long as you find your niche and you go for it. And also, it's very important to build a time frame to achieve these targets. So recognize that most games, when you launch them, they will not take off right away. Significant investment in terms of time and marketing, and also to tweak the game and balance it to figure out what's wrong. So usually, you'll launch something, you'll get some feedback from users, and then use that to kind of ramp up and continue to grow the game. And what happens if you don't spend a lot of time to focus on your vision and also on your goals and targets and the time frame, is that you just kind of end up getting lost. So you know, there's a lot of developers that I've met with before that have said, oh, you know, I had a really cool idea and let's just put it out there and see what happens. That's usually not a great formula for success. And unfortunately, most of the games that are launched do fail, and hopefully we can try to minimize that. Those failed apps in the App Store, we call them zombie apps. So you know, you're really trying to launch, you know, make the best possible game, but also get it out and make sure your studio can still pay the bill. So you're trying to balance your ROI from the game, but also make the coolest game possible. So please don't become a zombie. Think very clearly about your focus and what you're trying to achieve before you do anything else. All right, so those are the, you know, in terms of how to move forward, innovation always helps. So if you have something new that's not been in the market before, that's going to give you a first mover advantage, which is a competitive advantage that's impossible for other people to replicate. It's okay to fail. I think, you know, a lot of prominent game companies, they never really started with a hit. So as long as you plan for that and make sure that you're, you know, still able to continue to operate, you're still in good shape, because you're going to be able to learn from that experience and for your next game. All right, and most of all, stay focused. So the number 2 key that I want to talk about, which is very surprising when talking to developers, sometimes they don't really think about this, is that launch is only the beginning. So if you're a basketball player and you're trying to make it to the NBA, congratulations, you got drafted, right? But you know, that is actually just the beginning of your journey, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done from draft day to basically the rest of your career in order to be considered successful. So sorry if you guys don't like Kobe Bryant, but I'm just putting it out there. All right, so this is a slide from a great presentation at GDC from Storm 8, and really shows kind of the typical life cycle from their mobile games. What's interesting to note is that when you grow your mobile game, and even though eventually your users will hit its peak, it will level off and start to tail off. But if you manage the game properly, your revenue will still continue to increase. And this is an important distinction that sometimes developers are not thinking about. They're thinking in sprints, trying to get their game launched, but they don't put enough thought into what happens after the launch. So what happens is, if you maintain your game very, very properly with live ops, you're going to have lots of revenue even after your user numbers start to go down. All right, so this is hard data from a game which we published. I'm not going to share the name, but essentially the MAU numbers had kind of leveled off. But as you can see from the red circles, those are specific times where we ran promotional events, campaigns, seasonal events, sales, you name it. That translates directly into revenue for the game. So live ops are very, very important post-launch to really keep your users engaged and your revenue healthy. So not only from 6wave side, but I'm sure you guys probably play Clash of Clans. Some of you guys probably got involved in Clan Wars, which is the update that they finally came out with recently. I know that got me personally very re-engaged into the game, at least for now. And it's no coincidence that these guys are the top grossing game in the App Store. They also did a really good job collaborating with other top grossing developers. So you guys may have heard of Gung Ho Puzzle and Dragons. So they did a really cool crossover or collaboration, they call it, between Puzzle and Dragons and Clash of Clans. So really cool stuff. It makes sense because both kind of user bases really enjoy the same types of gameplay. Gung Ho just announced the other day that they're doing a crossover with Dragon Ball. So these are new things that keep users interested in coming back to the game. So, and just looking at Gung Ho in a little bit more detail, they just came out with their earnings a few weeks ago. Puzzle and Dragons is a game that's over 2 years old, so much, much longer than you would expect from a mobile game. And yet, their latest quarter, they have record sales in terms of revenue and also, more importantly, profit. And with the latest quarter, their profit is at a record level while spending less on advertising. So it really speaks to the importance of live operations and having that function built out. And in fact, they highlighted this on their investor call. So key takeaways, you must focus on live ops. If you invest in engaging your paying users, they will also invest and stay in the game and continue to play the game. Look and see what other people are doing in the market. There's some really cool crossovers and events that are happening to keep players engaged. And also look for synergies with IPs because they can inject new life into the game. Key number 3, take more shots. So that's Kevin Durant. He just won the MVP of the NBA, and he shoots a lot of shots and very high percentage. So what can we learn from that? Well, basically, for us, the riskiest launch that you can do is actually to launch a game on a single platform, single language, single market, or and by yourself. So if you're doing that, you're not shooting like Kevin Durant. You're actually just trying to take like a half-court heave like this guy and praying that it hits. It might not hit. All right, so how do we take more shots? One, think cross-platform. So Unity is leading the way. There's a lot of technologies out there. There's more tools than ever before to allow developers to actually get their game in as many different platforms as possible. So think about cross-platform. It's a must. In terms of platforms, obviously you guys are very well versed in iOS and Android. There's a lot of other platforms coming out there. So regional players like Tencent, Yahoo Mobile, mobile messaging platforms. So there's more platforms and more channels for users to discover games that you might not be focusing on, and you should think about getting your games on these platforms as well because it gives your games more chance to succeed. All right, so this cross-platform strategy has been proven really well in the market. Here's some examples of games which I originally played on Facebook that are now on mobile or other platforms, and they do a really good job of cross-platform. And actually, if you look at the stats, the revenues don't decrease, they don't cannibalize each other, they actually raise the level of performance from each platform. So your players are very invested and they want to continue playing wherever they may be. So that could be mobile, on their laptops, in front of their computer at work, so this kind of thing. So really cross-platform is something that if you have the capability, you should think about. And really investing in making sure your players can continue playing wherever they are. All right, so and if you're not really familiar with cross-platform, there's a lot of partners out there that can help with that. There's companies that do porting, they do development, you name it. Key number 4, think globally. So the NBA has really exploded over the last decade or so because they expanded and brought in a lot of international superstars. So this is something that I want to translate to gaming as well. So unfortunately, most games that are launched, especially mobile games, they only launch in English. The vast majority of games out there in the market are English language only games. And what happens is when these games don't succeed, they don't get localized to other languages. And what I'm here to say is that English is not everything. In fact, it's far from that. If you look at mobile gaming revenues, most of the revenue is actually coming from the other half of the world. They're actually coming from here in Asia. So if you're only thinking with an English language launch, you're leaving money on the table. All right, so this is the sort of top iPhone matrix from App Annie. We're going to zero in on what we care about the most, which is top grossing. If you look at the top grossing countries here, they all kind of look the same, except for where I want to zero in on, which is Japan. So if you look at Japan, the apps are top 5 apps, completely different from the rest of the top marketplaces in the world, and there's a reason for that, which I'll get into in just 1 minute. So these are the top iOS apps in Japan. If you look at top grossing, not a single one comes from a foreign publisher or a foreign developer. And that is because Asian gamers, specifically Japanese gamers, very, very sensitive. They don't enjoy playing what they perceive to be foreign or Western games. So if you're planning to bring your game to Asia, it's imperative that you localize your game. So not only translate the game from English to whatever the language may be, but also drill down and customize the content as much as you can so that local players don't perceive this to be a foreign game. It needs to feel like a local game, otherwise they'll reject it. All right, so I'll show you what I'm talking about. So this is a game that we launched on Facebook and also on mobile called Wonderland Epic. It's kind of Alice in Wonderland themed casual puzzle game. And this is kind of how we help to localize the graphics for the Japanese launch. So as you can see, much more anime style, cuter. It's doing okay in Japan right now. So that's kind of the level that we're trying to get at. In terms of, so it's not really just localization, we call it culturalization, to make it much more appealing to the local culture because local gamers will respond to this type of attention to detail. All right, so in addition to language, graphics, also little things like UI. So this is a card battle game that we were playing around with. You've got your 4 cards selected, and right now the UI is asking, okay, do you want to proceed with these cards? As a gamer, most of us would probably tap the blue button. In fact, that's wrong. So for Asian gamers, for Chinese gamers, in this case, they're expecting to hit the red button. Red is lucky, green is actually unlucky. We're used to tapping the red button, the right-hand button to proceed. They're used to tapping the left-hand button to proceed. So even something as simple as this, from a UI perspective, this little attention to detail could actually make or break your game in terms of succeeding in Asia. So if I'm a Japanese player or a Chinese player, and I'm looking to get going, and the UI has not been changed to account for my taste, I could be just canceling instead of proceeding. I'll get frustrated. I'm going to uninstall your game and play something else. All right? So a little bit more hard data about localization of content. So this came out recently from Distimo. They translated Boom Beach into Japanese, right? And the data is very clear, 17 times the amount of downloads for the Japanese language version. The revenue quadrupled as well. So it really speaks to the importance of localizing your game, putting a lot of thought into that, and not just releasing it and praying for the best. All right, so key takeaways on thinking global. There's a lot of revenue in other non-English markets. Think about how you can culturalize your game to make it as appealing as possible for local audience, and think about which languages fit best for your game. You can talk to local partners and publishers in specific countries and say, hey, what do you guys think? Does my game have appeal for your kind of audience? All right, so final key is team up when necessary. So this is a survey that was done before GDC that they do every year. It's about 3,000 game developers. As you can see, most developers are actually planning to self-publish. Actually, if you take the publishers out of this equation, it's actually more like 77% of developers. I didn't just do the math in my head, but anyway, most people are actually planning to self-publish, and that's totally fine. It's easier than ever to create a game. There's a lot of indie hits out there, particularly this year. But you have to really think about how you want to do this. So do I have the budget to actually handle user acquisition? You might be able to do that. There's a lot of crowdfunding sources, ways to get investment in your game and to develop a marketing budget. That's great. But even if you do have the budget, do you have the ability to do that? Do you have experience to run performance-based marketing campaigns? Do you have a network that can actually help to lower your cost of user acquisition? These are things that you must think about, otherwise you might not be that successful. So I'm a little bit biased, but as a publisher, publishers can bring a lot to the table. So not only the network, but also the marketing know-how, efficiency in running performance-based marketing. We have knowledge on regional platforms as well. And most importantly, the developer-publisher relationship is important because it allows developers to really focus on what they do best, which is making great content and great games. And all the other stuff which you could do yourself, but you might not want to, or you might not have the infrastructure to do, this is where a publisher can help. So maybe I'm really good at hidden object games on mobile, but I'm not strong in Japan, so maybe I should find a partner for Japan. Or maybe I should find a partner for China. So I don't think there's one developer or one partner out there that can do it all, right? So in those areas that you're looking to grow your game, it makes sense, if the business terms make sense, it makes sense to work with someone, team up. They can actually launch for you at very low risk. So bringing it back to the basketball analogy, a good publisher is kind of like a good Division I college. So if you do that, work with a strong party, they'll give you a really, really good chance to make the pros. All right? So key takeaways from partnerships. So as I just said, there's nobody out there that can do everything for every platform, every language. There's going to be people that are strong in specific pockets of the world. So especially now, talking to people here at Casual Connect, it seems like a lot of developers are going to try to publish their games in English by themselves, but maybe they need help here in Asia, and that's kind of what companies such as ourselves or some of our peers here are here to do. All right, so as developers, you guys have studios to run. You need to figure out how to get the most out of your game with limited resources. So that's why it makes sense to consider partnering with a publisher. We can help out in a lot of different ways. And these days, for really top quality games, publishers are more flexible than ever before because they really want good content because it's actually pretty hard to find. All right, so just to sum up, here are the 5 keys. One is have a very, very clear vision and stay focused on what you're trying to build and achieve with your launch. 2, launch is not the beginning, not the end, it's actually just the beginning. So think very carefully about how you're planning to support your game post-launch with live ops, because that drives engagement as well as revenue. 3, you want to take as many shots as possible. So think cross-platform. You're trying to give your game as many chances to succeed in the market as possible. And related to that, think globally. So not only different platforms, different markets, different languages. If you can't do all of that, there's a lot of partners that can help. So that brings me to the last point, which is number 5. Find the strongest possible partners for each of these areas and partner up when you can. So final words. So this is a pretty good quote that I like to refer to from a very famous basketball player. Talent wins games, but teamwork and intelligence wins championships. Anyone know who said that one? I thought, very good, Michael Jordan. So greatest of all time. So definitely, like, I think the message is here that, you know, there's a lot of talented developers here. Just think about how you can actually make your launch effective. If you don't think you can do it yourself, or there's specific areas that you need help, this is what publishers are here to do. So that's pretty much all I've got. Thank you.